Hey guys, today we're going to start our discussion on World War I and the United States role in the war. I know in World History, most of you guys have covered the war probably a little more in depth than we're going to talk about it today or in this unit because we're going to be discussing mainly America's role. But first we're going to provide a little background and talk about the outbreak of the war, what leads to it, and how it quickly reaches a stalemate in Europe. So the sparks of World War I, really the spark that ignites the explosion of the war is the assassination of Austrian Archduke Franz Ferdinand by a Bosnian teenager by the name of Gavrilo Princip. He was a member of the Black Hand, a terrorist organization which was a nationalist group that wanted to free Bosnia from Austro-Hungarian rule. And actually, he's Bosnian. He lives in Bosnia, but he's an ethnic Serb. He's Serbian. So we'll see how Serbia kind of gets in there. But anyway, there was information that the Archduke was going to be visiting Bosnia, and the Black Hand plans to assassinate the Archduke and his family on their visit. On June 28, 1914, Princip accidentally finds himself in front of the Archduke's car and fatally shoots both the Archduke and his wife. He fires into the car, killing them both. Most Americans at the time cared very little about the assassination. It didn't really affect them, and Americans back then, as we are sometimes now, weren't really concerned all that much with international news. However, within just over a month, all of Europe had been plunged into war by this assassination. Now, Princip provides the spark, but the powder keg was created by some long-term circumstances that existed. We're going to talk about those. So, about 1914, Europe was charged for war, or was primed for war, and he provides the charge that sets it off. So there were many causes of the Civil War, of World War I. And one of the main causes is nationalism. Nationalism is this extreme pride that people feel for their country. It's kind of like patriotism's bigger, ugly cousin on steroids. Basically, nationalism goes beyond just loving your country, and it leads to the belief that your nation or your group, your national group, is actually superior to others. And the struggle for power was visible in the Balkan region of which had been controlled by the Ottoman Empire and was being pushed in on by the Austro-Hungarian Empire. The Ottoman Empire was falling apart. Austria-Hungary saw an opportunity to expand and began to annex territories. The Slavic people, Slavs being an ethnic group in Eastern Europe and Russia, wanted to revolt against the Austro-Hungarian expansion. And Russia, which is a Slavic nation, considered itself kind of the protector of the Slavs. Imperialism is another problem. Many nations were trying to expand and gain more colonial empires. Britain and France already had large empires. Germany begins to seek more colonies as well. So Kaiser Wilhelm II, who was the king of Germany, starts to build a stronger military and colonize different areas. The third ism that we'll talk about is militarism. This is the policy of not just building large militaries, but glorifying military service and warfare as positive things. Germany built a strong navy to try to rival Britain's, and Germany enlarged its army, but it also updated its army. By 1914, it had the most modern, well-equipped, and well-trained army in Europe. They drew up war plans like the Schlieffen Plan, and the Schlieffen Plan was a way for Germany to avoid a two-front war. The Schlieffen Plan basically said, if Russia declared war on Germany, then it would take Russia time to mobilize for war. So Germany would go ahead and attack France first very quickly to try to knock them out of war so they could focus all of their time and efforts on Russia. Britain, France, and Russia had also begun these war preparations. So all of these isms kind of contribute to it. And then you have this system of tangled alliances that exists in Europe. Nations began forming alliances or partnerships for protection with one another. They were formed to maintain peace and a balance of power, but generally lead directly to the war. Before the war, you had a military alliance between Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy called the Triple Alliance. The Triple Alliance was countered by France and Russia, who formed an alliance with one another, and then Great Britain joined the alliance between France and Russia called the Triple Entente. The way I remember this is Entente is French, and France was in it. Some European leaders believed that these alliances created a balance of power in which each nation had equal strength, which meant that they were less likely to go to war with each other. However, the assassination of Franz Ferdinand exposes flaws in the balance of power theory as Europe plunges into war very quickly. All right, so basically, after the assassination, Princip was arrested. Austro-Hungarian officials learned that Serbian government had supplied assassins with the bombs and the weapons. So they blamed Serbia for the killing. And because Russia had vowed to protect Serbia, Russia's armies began to mobilize. So Austria basically declares war on Serbia. Russia begins to mobilize to defend Serbia. Germany, seeing that Russia is mobilizing and preparing for attack on Austria-Hungary, declares war on Russia and on France because of the Schlieffen Plan. So Germany follows the Schlieffen Plan. They knew they couldn't invade through France because it would take too long. Their defenses along the French-German border were too great, so it would take the German army too long to break through those defenses. So they decided to go through Belgium, and they asked Belgium for permission to go through Belgium. Belgium declined, and then Germany attacked anyway. So Belgium now was brought into the war, and Great Britain, who was an ally of Belgium, declared war on Germany. So now you have the basic sides chosen. On the Central Powers side, you have Germany, Austria-Hungary, and the Ottoman Empire. That is the Central Powers. The Allied powers at the time were Great Britain, France, and Russia. Now, Germany's plan worked well in Belgium. The Belgians only had 6 divisions of troops. Germany sent 750,000 troops into Belgium and ran very quickly through Belgium. However, a new kind of warfare quickly develops. As word of Germany's invasion spreads to France and other European nations, French troops mobilized to meet German divisions. Now, France had not updated its army and really looked as much like it did 40 years earlier. They wore bright red coats, heavy brass helmets. German troops were dressed in gray uniforms that oftentimes served as camouflage in the battlefield. The strategy of the French was still bad too. They still used the old continental system where they marched row by row onto the battlefield with bayonets and prepared for close combat. The Germans, however, had developed machine guns and killed thousands of French troops per day in early battle. Over 15,000 French troops died a day starting off. A well-trained German machine gun team could really set up equipment in 4 seconds and match the firepower of over 50 to 100 French rifles. So Germany not only had a manpower advantage, they had a training advantage, and they had a weapons advantage as well. Many Europeans thought that this was going to be a short war and that France would be defeated very quickly. However, at the first Battle of the Marne, the French make a stand. And basically what we see happen is the French launch a counterattack along the Marne River, east of Paris, about 60 miles east of Paris, I believe. And this became known as the First Battle of the Marne. 2 million men fought on this battlefront, and it was a 125-mile front, massive front. And after 5 days, 250,000 people had been killed. That's the equivalent of 5 Vietnam Wars that were killed in 5 days. The French had rallied and pushed the Germans back some 40 miles. So the French paid a heavy price. countless French men had died in battle, and however, it stops the German advance and gives Russia time to mobilize its army. Once Russia had mobilized, Germany had to split its forces and send some to the east and some to the west. Basically, they sent some troops to fight Russia on the eastern front, which stretched from the Black Sea to the Baltic Sea. So anyway, as a result of Germany having to split its forces, the war turns into basically a stalemate, at least on the western front. The First Battle of the Marne ended in a stalemate, and German and French soldiers start to dig trenches. Now, this trench warfare trench systems are going to stretch over 400 miles across Western Europe and extend all the way from Switzerland to the North Sea. Trench warfare was an old strategy. It had been around forever, but this is the first time that it was used on such large scales. Soldiers lived in the trenches surrounded by machine gun fire, grenades, artillery shells. Machine guns were locked in on the positions, and thousands of men that ran into the area between the trenches charging the enemy went into an area called as no man's land. That's the area between the trenches where people were mowed down by machine gun fire. Neither Allies nor the Germans were able to make significant advances, which created a massive stalemate or deadlock. So to break this stalemate, both sides developed these even more horrific means of warfare. German military scientists experimented with poisonous gas, and it was terrifying for the soldiers that were attacked by gas, but it wasn't really effective because oftentimes the wind could change and it could backfire and send the gas to the German soldiers. And still, they threw canisters of gas into Allied trenches, fired them from artillery shells, and even though many regretted using it, the British and the French began using it very quickly too. Tanks were another new weapon. They were armored vehicles that could move into no man's land, but they were limited in success because they often got stuck in the mud, and Germans found a way to destroy them with artillery. A really new method of warfare were airplanes. Both sides used them to plan and map and spy on enemy positions, and you start having early bombs. Planes would drop brinks or heavy objects on enemy troops, and they also started mounting machine guns on planes, and you start to have the first dogfights, these fights between individual airplanes in the air. And of course, the most famous of the dogfighters was the German ace, the Red Baron, who shot down 80 planes until he was shot down. So these new weapons of war are really going to change the face of warfare during World War I. All right, so we're going to talk about some of the major battles in the war that happened before the United States becomes involved. And Battle of Tannenberg, August 1914, was Russia's worst defeat in the war. They lost tens of thousands of troops. Of course, we already talked about the First Battle of the Marne. You had the Battle of Ypres in October, November of 1914, which really is the last major German offensive until 1918. And after this, they settle into that kind of stalemate along the Western Front. The Battle of Gallipoli, April through December of 1915, was a failed attempt of the Allies to knock the Ottoman Empire out of the war and open up shipping lines to Russia through the Dardanelles. The Battle of Verdun was the longest battle of World War I, huge loss of life in 1916. The Battle of the Somme, July to November of 1916, was the first great offensive of the British. Another battle where we had staggering losses of life. The Third Battle of Ypres was in 1917. It had so many losses that the name came to mean senseless slaughter. And finally, the Battle of Caporetto in November 1917, which was a tremendous victory for the Central Powers. So really, you have this terrible war of attrition where, they're kind of just killing thousands of each other and seeing who's going to run out of materials and manpower first, who's going to run out of will first. And basically, before the United States joins the war, you have this battle of attrition going on. The United States, when it enters, is going to help turn the tide a little bit. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that in the next video. We'll see you next time. Bye.